Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about niches and community interactions. So we've spoken a lot about the different types of organisms that exist, right? The producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, so on and so forth. Today we're really going to be taking it a step further, talking about those interactions that exist within the ecosystem. Alrighty, so every single organism is going to have a level of tolerance, right? So the goal of species is hopefully they're surviving, they're thriving, they're getting the food they need, and in turn, then they're going to reproduce. So they need a certain amount of environmental conditions and circumstances in order to do all of those things. So every species is going to have this tolerance range. It's their ability to survive and reproduce under a range of environmental circumstances. Again, you're going to have your optimal range, and then when you're experiencing a little bit of stress. So this stress, I want you guys to remember this term, this environmental stress could be things like competition, right? If you're competing for food, shelter, if it's difficult for you to be eating or capturing food, you're not going to be worried about reproduction or getting your population up because you're worried about personal survival, right? So that reproduction and your population going up only happens within that tolerance range and really only under those optimal conditions. Alrighty, so some terms we need to know about is like a niche describes not only what an organism does, but also how it interacts with biotic and abiotic factors. Alrighty, and this niche, in order to exist in your niche, you need these resources. So resources are your necessities of life. So for every species, it's going to look different. You're going to need a certain amount of water, different amount of nutrients, light, food, space you're going to exist in, whatever it is. So we can see here the niche amongst this tree. You have all these different types of warblers, and they're going to make their homes in different parts of the tree. Alrighty, so there's going to be this competition that's making these niches. So there's different types of competition that exists. There's intraspecific competition, which is between the same species. So we see that with these two lions kind of fighting for their pride, right? So the lions are going to fight for the female lions. And then you're going to have the interspecific competition, which is between different species. So we saw that before with the birds on the tree, that's niche partitioning. So we saw, right, all different species of warblers, and they're ending up in these different areas of the same tree for whatever reason. Alrighty, and then there's also a different type of interspecific competition, which is competitive exclusion principle. So this is that one species outcompetes the other so much, so it's so much stronger, that it's actually causing local extinction. So not actual extinction, but just in that area, that one species is not going to be able to get any sort of resources, so it's going to have to move somewhere else in order to get the necessities for life. So we can see here in these graphs, the first graph is showing there's no competition, so there's no niche overlap. And then in the second graph, we do see a niche overlap. Right, so this is when they're going to be competition existing, and you're going to have that niche partitioning happening where they're going to have to live in different areas. Alrighty, so we can see that in an example here with our bacteria. Right, these two different types of bacteria, when grown in separate flasks, both populations thrive. Right, they still hit a carrying capacity, probably running out of room, maybe some food resources, so their population does cap off. But when grown in separate containers, they'll both grow successfully. If they're grown in the same flask, here is where we see the stronger bacterium really overcome. Right, so over here around day 9, we see, right, when they're trying to now compete for food and space, they're competing for those resources. Now we have some stress going on, right? Our P. aurelia is going to be the stronger species. They are going to be able to meet their needs. The other bacteria will not, and their population is going to die off. Alrighty, so niche partitioning, why does this happen? Well, it's basically to decrease competition, right? Populations will decrease their fundamental niche to a realized niche. So a fundamental niche is the full range of resources without competition or limiting factors. Alrighty, so this Cape May warbler, its fundamental niche would be the entire tree. Right, this Cape May warbler can definitely live wherever on this tree. It would be able to get its full range of resources wherever, right? Limiting factors too, right? It would be able to get its water, it would be able to get all the nutrients it needed. But because there's this competition with the other warblers, it's just going to exist at the very top of that tree, right? It has what's known as the realized niche or niche. These are resources that are used when there's competition, right? So it can still live up here, but it's going to do this to avoid the other birds and avoid competing with the other birds because it doesn't have to up here, right? Much easier life. We see this as well with barnacles. So if you see here, I always pronounce these two wrong, so I'm just going to call them the brown and the blue barnacle. But that brown barnacle, its fundamental niche we've seen when the blue is not there in the area, it actually can exist in this entire area. But when you have the blue barnacle there, the blue barnacle is stronger. So that brown barnacle is going to stay in its realized niche at the top and just be fine staying up there. Whereas then our blue barnacle here is going to take up its entire fundamental niche. So this blue barnacle does not want to live up here, so it's not even competing for that area. Alrighty, so again in this graph we have that overlap, that competition. So you have the stronger competitor reaching its full fundamental niche. The weaker competitor is not going to take up its full fundamental niche. It's just going to stay within its realized niche. So even if some of them have to have a little bit of stress in their tolerance zone. Alrighty, so there's going to be different types of relationships that exist within these communities. You have predator-prey relationships and herbivore-plant relationships. So an herbivore-plant relationship is an interaction in which one animal feeds on the producer. Right, this can affect the size and distribution of plant populations in a community and determine the places that certain plants can grow and survive. So we saw this in the ecosystem gizmo, right, where we saw the deer population getting really, really large. And in turn, it affected a lot of the plants, a lot of the bushes that were growing, and then eventually even affected the soil. And then we have predator-prey relationships. These are interactions in which one animal, the predator, will capture and feed on another animal, the prey. This can affect the size of the prey populations in a community and determine the places prey can live and feed. So predator-prey relationships are going to be very, very important. We see, right, the mice and bird population, very important. Mice reproduce quite a bit, so the bird population is really helping control that population size. Predator-prey relationships also tend to have a scenario like this, where the predator is always going to lag behind the prey, right? The predator needs to eat these prey. So if the prey population is getting larger, now the predator population is eating better, so their population is going to grow, right? They're in their optimal conditions because they're all eating. They're going to be reproducing. As they're eating and reproducing more, now you're getting less and less prey because they've eaten too many. So the prey population declines, and then in turn, the predator population is going to decline. And then the cycle will keep continuing. So what we call that is the boom-bust cycle. Alright, so here in St. Matthew Island of Alaska, we saw that there were no predators, so the predators were removed on the island, and then the caribou population grew out of control. Right, so then what happens there? The caribou are eating all of the plants and the shrubs. Right, so their population at first is going to grow. Great, no one's consuming them. Right, so they're just eating and being happy. But eventually, their population is getting too big. They're going to deplete the land of their resources. So then they don't have any food to eat. Their population is going to crash. That's the bust. Alrighty, so some other species that are important. The keystone species, we've spoken about them. Species whose impact on its community is larger than its biomass or abundance indicates. The example we spoke about in class was the sea otter. Right? Sea otters are going to eat barnacles. Barnacles will eat kelp. So if no one's controlling the barnacle population, there's going to be no kelp forest left. It would get all eaten by the barnacles. And that kelp is home to thousands of different organisms and fish species. Alrighty, so this keystone word comes from architecture, right? This beautiful arch. If you remove that keystone, the whole structure would fall down. Other important relationships to be aware of are going to be called mutualistic relationships, parasitic relationships, and commensalism. Alrighty, so all of these are types of symbiosis. So there are these long-term relationships that involve direct contact between organisms. So mutualistic is going to be that both are positive, so both species benefit from this type of relationship. Parasitism is going to be where one benefits and the other is harmed. And commensalism is where one species benefits and the other is neutral or not affected at all. And there are some skeptics about commensalism where they don't think it actually exists. So some ideas of commensalism are like when you do a good deed for someone, right? You're still getting that kind of relief or feel good feeling. So some people believe that commensalism does not actually exist in nature, but we'll show you some examples and see what you think. So mutualistic relationship here is one of them, so with a sea anemone and a clownfish. So a clownfish is using the sea anemone for protection from other predator species. The sea anemone is going to be kind of benefiting from this idea that other people are going to be trying to hunt the clownfish. So as those other species get closer to trying to eat the clownfish, the sea anemone is actually going to attack and be able to get a meal from that. The clownfish benefits because it is getting those extra scraps from the fish that has now died, and then also the clownfish is in turn getting protection. Alright, some other mutualistic relationships. Here you have a leaf-eating plant, leaf-eating ant. So that leaf-eating ant is going to bring that plant over to the fungi. The fungi benefits because now it's getting the leaf that it can decompose and consume. The ant is actually getting antibiotics from the fungi to help it survive. Here you have a bee and flower. Right? The bee is getting nectar, and then the pollen, you can see a whole bunch of pollen here on his little legs. When he goes to another plant, he's going to go ahead and pollinate that other flower. Alrighty, parasitism. So parasites actually don't want to kill their host, despite what many people think. It just sort of happens for the most part. Parasites, when they find their host, they are getting that food and shelter from the organism. So here you have your tapeworm living within inside of the cat. So there you have a parasitic relationship. Commensalism, so again, that's when one benefits and one is neither being, it's really being unaffected or it's neutral. So you have the barnacles living on the whale. So they're kind of just going for a ride on the whale. The whale doesn't mind. But the barnacles are getting a place to live and they're going to be eating off of the whale. Here you have a rhino and the oxpecker. So oxpecker is kind of getting its food, place to sit. The rhino is not disturbed by it at all, so he kind of just goes about his business. Alrighty, so those are all the relationships you want to know about within our ecosystem. Right, if you have any questions, please make sure to ask in class.